You can't, I can't,
Yep.
people can't? Huh?
You can call.
Okay, we're just waiting for another commissioner. It'll be just a second.
Call it, Monticello Development or something. But it's in that area of what we call R.
Hey, Mayor Lebanon, is it still fuzzy on your end?
No, it's much better. Thank you, Mac.
Okay, perfect. You hear that echo, Trey?
You bet. No. Yep. Perfect. So anyway, you have to get the project on the CIB list. We did that at our last commission. We approved the list for this next year. Once you have it on the list, you have to identify the project to the public and hold a public hearing and get comment from the public. And then you fill out an application for the CIB. And when that application comes up for a presentation before the CIB, you take it and present it. If you got engineers, they'll help you or whatever. Take the project to the CIB and they'll present it to the CIB, and then the CIB decides based on what your revenues are, they decide how much grant and how much loan they give you for your project. Does that make sense? So if you have a $10 million project, they might say, well, because you have money coming in from this place or this place, we'll give you $5 million grant and a $5 million loan. Just depends on the project, how it shakes out, but that's the process. And it works pretty good. We've done a lot of projects in San Juan County. We did, with CIB money, we did the new bridge at Gypsum Creek. You know where Gypsum Creek is? Down close to the VCA road when you go down that way. A little bit south of Alchita. There was floods come across the road there all the time, so they did a bridge across that. We did some of the rehab work on Paiute Bridge several years ago when the abutments were being deteriorated. We had to go back in and fix those.
Down to Canyon?
Down in the canyon. And we did a project last year. We put a new shop for the road department down here.
Oh, yeah.
And the new mental health and public health and clinic down in Blanding, that was done with CIB funds. Let's see, did a couple of senior centers with CIB funds. We built a new senior center. Let's see, one in Blanding. Trying to remember where else we did. Oh, we did one in Monticello. A couple of things on the CIB list for this year is to remodel a jail. You know how we went over there and they had all those leaks in the roof?
Right.
So we got that on. I think that's coming up pretty soon to go before the board. We have a new road drainage plan in Spanish Valley and Monument Valley to get the drainage so that it doesn't wash out the roads. That's on the list. What else is on that CIB list, Mac, for this year?
So those are the two.
The jail and the drainage.
Yeah, that's Spanish Valley plan.
CIB funds, right?
The old,
Yeah, on that route, so the
The
route
old
that's being
chapter
washed.
house.
that's all demolished.
Well, no, gonna build a new one over there.
So it's just
And,
the road. So the road going to
and,
that area is getting all washed out, and we need to improve that road. It's a county road. And so all that stormwater and everything is eating out the side of that road.
But are they gonna rebuild the chapter house where
No,
it
the
was?
only one they're working
gonna
on
build,
is the
rebuild
trading
it at
post.
the, next to the, visitor center.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
Yeah, the only thing we're working on
There's
is
some
the.
NRF funds that were set aside to help with that project.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When I was on the NRF board, we set aside
Started catching money?
500,000, maybe 2 different times
Okay.
to deal with the, old Jado chapter house.
Yeah. They were trying to get some, capital improvement monies from the Navajo
Yeah.
Nation.
Well, they have some money they can use as match with NRF.
I think that there was enough money, but the land acquisition was
Mhm.
the
Some,
question.
whether the grazer will let them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
Do you know, before I got on the commission one time, they were gonna put a brand new airport, public airport at Monument Valley?
Right, that's what we've been saying.
And the federal government committed to build the airport and give the airport $1 million a year for operation.
Mhm.
But one grazer stopped it.
Hmm.
One of the grazers wouldn't commit to the land. And there could have been a brand new airport with some jobs and money to run it
Mhm.
from the FAA. But one grazer didn't want it. And that was before I got on the commission. I just remember hearing about it in Naaman.
Are we waiting on, Larry Boy?
Commissioner Maryboy. When I spoke to
Do you
him,
wanna
he was
start?
at Deckers Hill.
Yeah,
He wants to start.
It's cool. So I talked to him at 8:34. He was at Deckers Hill. Where's Deckers Hill?
It's between Bluff and Blanding. It's almost, Deckers Hill is almost by the
34.
landfill, isn't it?
Oh, is it by the landfill?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's 9:16, and that was 8:34. So he should be here. And it doesn't take an hour to get.
How long it take to drive from the landfill up here?
Normally about 45 minutes, but I happen to do it in about 20 today, so it wasn't that bad.
So 8:30 to 9:16. That's 45,
Should be
46
here.
minutes. Yeah, should be walking in.
They do have the construction going on down there though, the CATAC construction.
Oh, do they?
But, none of the cones were out when I came here.
Where are they constructing?
So they did an overlay from Shirt Tail Corner, all the way down to just about the,
Ute Ridge.
tribe.
Wow, okay.
I know I can be.
We need an overlay of one more lane from here to Spanish Fork.
I'm no expert road builder, but just as a member of the general public who sees their tax dollar at work, I look at that and I go, holy moly, where's the quality control guy on this?
Well, Randy, you need to go to Salt Lake more often and watch them rebuild I-15 one more time.
Every 2 years.
It's constant construction.
It is. They
they
finish.
rebuild
They
I-15
start
and
all over. Yeah.
They use up all the money up there and none of it can come south.
It's Olympic money, and then it
Because
went.
they gotta rebuild I-15 one more time.
Yeah. They're doing a mighty good job.
Well, I will give them credit. There was an area just as you go south, just past Shirt Tail, that was pretty washboardy.
Well, that,
And it would pull your vehicle to one side or the other. And they did take care of that.
Good.
But yeah, you'd think there'd just be nice, smooth asphalt, but there's a seam right down the middle of the road of about an inch difference in height. And then every so often
beginning engineers down in San Juan County. I don't know.
I don't know.
We had that CDC meeting yesterday. And the lieutenant governor's the chair. The governor was the chair when he was lieutenant governor.
Oh, okay.
So he was at that meeting. It was in Cedar City. So I just did it on Zoom. And he turned the chair over to
To the new
lieutenant governor. You don't
Hey,
recognize him,
there
do
he
you?
is. Ah, Commissioner. We
Yeah.
can't even see you with your camera on.
You got a brand new chair and a brand new computer.
Yeah, it's kind of weird walking in and
Yeah.
see a whole new window.
No closet thing here.
Yeah. So where do I sit here?
So right next.
Where your name is. You don't know
Right,
what
you're
your
the
name
next
is?
one.
I don't even know what my name was.
Yeah, that one's yours
Right
right there.
That's yours.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, you can't watch any movies on that computer.
Yeah, that's gonna be hard. Kind of nice here.
I know, a little bit different, huh?
A new sound system. Yeah,
Did you get my text?
see that camera up in the back?
Yeah, I was looking at that.
That goes directly to the sheriff's office. See if we misbehave.
Man, John David, you brought breakfast.
Huh?
John David brought breakfast. He's got bananas and like yogurt.
JD? Yeah. Oh yeah, he's a grown boy. This about how the city council meetings run, George?
Say again?
This is about how the city council meetings run?
Oh, no, we're on time.
You're
We get
efficient,
going.
huh?
Oh, yeah, we get going. Business, get down to business, get home.
That's good to hear.
Is it broadcasting you on?
Good to hear.
Aha.
Understand the Water Conservancy is gonna sell all the water in Lloyd's Lake
They better not sell it all.
to the irrigators.
No, 700, oh, they only have 700 acres.
They're gonna sell 700?
That's what I think that's the last I've heard.
Do you know how much is in there?
Not much. That'll get it down to the city emergency storage.
Will it? That's a good idea, huh?
A lot of good ideas.
So everything's being controlled from there, huh?
When we do run out of water, we're gonna look at everybody that has a green lawn. We're gonna go shake them up.
Yeah. Yeah, you think you got an easy job, George?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As
Good morning,
some
Jay.
of these lawns gonna get less easy.
Morning.
Could be an ugly year.
Could be.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
been
it's gonna
water,
be.
but inte sound så
It's
generad.
already heading that way.
Somewhere, yeah.
Ready?
It's up to Willie. He didn't get his coffee this morning. He's gotta have
I
some
did,
Gatorade.
I did. No coffee this morning. So, what's up?
You can have some more hot chocolate.
We'll go ahead and call the session to order at this time. Board of Commissioner work session meeting. We have some items on the agenda. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
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 And full quorum, so
Yeah.
no question about that.
Yep.
And the agenda items are to be read by Mr. Nadano.
Okay, on the agenda items for the work session today, we've got the presentation of the 2021 through 2026 landfill plan and goals. So will be provided by Randy is just an overview, so you guys understand kind of where we're at with those, kind of going forward as we project out. Number 2 on here, you've got the Bluff Transfer Station history and discussion, and I'll get into that a little bit further with your packet. And then on item number 3 is just an update with the 2021 illegal dumping notice. This is also on your commission agenda today as well, just more of a notice to the public regarding illegal dumping. Then on item 4, we have you'll need to make a motion to enter into closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical and mental health of an individual is permitted under UCA 52-4-205. That is your agenda for today. Where it's a work session, this is more just kind of a staff opportunity to meet with you. We do have members of the public in attendance, really not a public comment period. This is mostly for us to brief you. If there's any questions or direction that you have of us or staff, then you can ask those questions of us. But primarily, it is just that, a work session where we get an opportunity to meet with you on an administrative staff level and pick your brain, get your ideas and direction for further, or, are we heading in the right direction? You'll typically see this come about here now that we're out of the COVID area and restrictions. We'll start bringing in department reports and everything to you so that you have a little bit more familiarity with what's going on in the county at the department level, so we can get your feedback and direction on those as well. And so with that, Commissioner, if we can head into item number 1, a presentation of the landfill plan and goals. We'll turn some time over to Randy.
Do we have that written someplace in here? That plan, or is it just on our phone? Randy's?
It's in the other binder. So this is the commission meeting one.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Binder over there, the white one.
Good morning.
Yeah, there. 2 separate.
Randy Rarick here, manager of the San Juan County landfill. Just kind of a brief overview. I've been in place down there for just over 5 years. Mac and I talked just a little bit the other day, but we just kind of want to hit the high points here. I'm not going to read line item by line item on this plan. We can certainly go back and I'll try to address any questions you have to the best of my ability. What we wanted to do here today is just kind of do just an overview of where we're at, where we're going, and what our kind of our financial situation is, and where are we spending money, where should we be spending money. So just as an overview again, the landfill was built in 1993. We're 27 years into it, depending on if I could maybe say 28 years in our 28th year. When I got hired 5 years ago, I did a quick financial recap of things. Where are we at? I asked the clerk's office to give me a kind of a history as far back as they could go. I got a 7-year recap of the financials of the landfill, and over that 7 years, the landfill had lost about $400,000. I dug deeper and I looked at where are we losing the money, and we didn't take long to make a decision that something had to change. And over the course of the next 2 years, we talked about restructuring our tipping fees and kind of changing the operation to try to pull some cost out. We did a good job of that. Prior to my being hired, like I say, having lost money, they were spending in excess of what the revenue was. As of today, well, I should say, as of last year, our hopes were that we would be able to maintain our expenses at the landfill at a level of about $400,000 a year. And with the price increase and the operational changes, we're going to be seeing revenue of around $700,000 a year. So that leaves us, I guess in government we don't talk about profit, we talk about excess money over the needed expenditures. And we were targeting that $300,000 range, looking forward and figuring where do we need to be. We started out with a 10-year plan, and that was just a bit too aggressive, so we backed it up to a 5-year plan. And we felt that $300,000, if it could be raised at the landfill and stay at the landfill and go into improvements at the landfill, that's something that we could work with. With that, I give a little bit of an overview too. We give some tonnage numbers, and again, I'll address any questions that you have on that. But several months ago, we were tasked with putting this plan together and having, no more than about 10 bullet points, things that we were going to focus on. So I think that the number one thing that we have to continue keeping an eye on at the landfill is the pricing. Nobody likes price increases, but I think history has shown, and I believe the manager at the time of the city of Monticello had kind of pleaded with us at the time, let's not let this happen again, where we passed on a 47% price increase, and the comment was, we need to visit this more often, or smaller increases if needed, instead of big increases. So we need to keep an eye on that, and we're doing that. Today, again, we're still okay, but you'll see as we get into the capital plan, something's going to have to take place in the future in order for us to keep the we've talked about that. There's some issues with DEQ, and we're supposed to close these cells as they get full. We're working on that right now. We have had the DEQ down. They toured the area, and they told us that they were happy to see that we're going in the direction that we are. This isn't something that we do in months. This is something that's going to take years to do. Our goal for this year is to get at least 2.5 acres of the current open area closed. We have about 13 acres of cells that have been either filled or we're currently filling. We've got 7 cells total. We're working in cell number 5. Cells 1 through 4 are full. And then we have 2 C and D areas, one of which we've stopped participating as far as contributing waste to that area, and then we've developed another one. So our plan is to close off the older C and D area and then move into cell 1. We're hoping, like I say, to get that done by the end of this year. That'll be a good accomplishment. We looked into the community, which this meeting started out as a request to talk about illegal dumping, and then it kind of morphed into these other items. From the landfill, with the money, with the price increase, we felt like we'd have a little bit of extra money that we could put back into the communities. Go to these problem areas. I've received several phone calls over the last 6 months for sure. I've received several calls from LaSalle. I've received calls from the Hatch area, from Hovenweep, Blanding, surrounding area, the old dump site in Blanding, and the rifle range. I continue to get comments about, when is the county going to get in and clean this stuff up? And we just had no money to do it before. Now I think we can do that, but we want to reach out to communities. Go into these communities, at least that would be my hope, my plan, to go into these communities like Aneth and Montezuma Creek and, Ojado, and there's been talk about Navajo Mountain, and not so much go in to take care of the regular household trash. That's not the idea. The idea is to go in on these back roads where people have dumped their TVs and their couches and their mattresses, work with the community to try to clean those areas up. We don't want to take charge of it. It needs to be a community-led, community-driven effort, but we want to be there to support them with our equipment, our dumpsters, and then we'll work out something as far as the tipping fees and whatnot. But that's kind of the whole concept behind that. Item number 4, fencing, trash pickup. We have a huge problem at the landfill. The wind is not our friend, and it's been that way for a long, long time. And we just need to quit doing the same things, and we need to improve. We need to get better at what we're doing, both operationally in minimizing the opportunities for this litter to be blown around, but also when it does happen, and it does happen, we need the resources in place to be able to get it taken care of, such as fencing to keep it on our property, and then even when the wind fences catch it and it falls, you got to go pick it up. And that's just not been something that we've been able to do. Our fencing is inadequate, and a lot of the wind-blown trash leaves our property. The DEQ comes down. There's a regulator assigned to our facility. Since this COVID thing kicked in, we haven't seen him. I think we saw him once. Brand new guy came down just before the COVID thing hit, and he did kind of warn us. Wind-blown trash, he took some pictures, and he said he's got a whole new management structure above him. All the old guard has retired. And I believe, Mac, you were with us on that drive around, and he basically kind of planted the seed that wind-blown trash is the biggest thing he's going to be looking at. And his management comes out of that. His management structure above him comes from the air quality side of the DEQ. And he told us that they have made a practice of fining people that are in non-compliance, which is that's not anything that was ever done that I know of on the solid waste side. So he said, if we can't control this, we may find ourselves with some fines. So it's really important that we control our wind-blown trash. Cell access, efficient cell utilization.
Randy,
Sure.
I'm looking at all of the parts.
Okay.
While I was looking at all the parts in number 4. So is it realistic to think that the prisoners from the sheriff's office can be made whole?
We have tapped into that resource in the past. Of course, the whole COVID thing kind of put a bit of a kibosh on that, but historically, they're receptive to us asking for that help. Their limitation is they've got 2 different types of inmates. They've got state inmates and county inmates. The state inmates require a sheriff's deputy to be the supervisor. They just haven't had staffing that they feel that without forcing people into overtime, they just haven't had the staffing for that. On the other side, the county inmate side, the landfill people, our staff, can be the supervisors of those inmates. Again, during the COVID thing, that wasn't even talked about, but since that's been letting up, I've talked to them a couple times, and they just don't have the number of inmates that we can do that. We're talking about it, but it's been done in the past, but it's a bit difficult.
What's an enclosed dumping station?
So if you look at our surrounding communities, Moab would be a good example. They just have a building that they do all their curbside collection, and all of the trucks go to that building, and they have a tipping floor, and they dump their loads on that floor. In that tipping floor, then they pull out certain recyclables, metals, things like that, and they set them aside. Then they push all that material off the floor into some compaction trailers. And they run 2 trucks a day out to their Klondike landfill. And so in doing that, you get this trash that's being dumped out of these trucks. It gets it out of the wind. And it's just a more sanitary way to deal with it. It's really kind of a state-of-the-art. Cortez, I went over, had some time to kill when I was in the Cortez area, and they built a really nice area where they do some inside dumping as well, and kind of a recycling effort of sorts, cardboard and whatnot. So it's kind of the first step of building into the future. We just, it really would be an opportunity to get us out of the wind and control the trash to a much higher degree than we can right now.
Which trash do they get out? Recyclable or the other?
Yeah, well, each location does things a little differently. Cortez, they tried their residential trash, and their balers are very expensive, and they were breaking down a lot, so they kind of backed away from doing that. But that's a really good idea if you can do it. You can go from a 1,200 pounds per cubic yard compaction to 3,000, 3,600. I mean, you can pack a lot more trash into a lot smaller space. But your repair costs, if your equipment's not good, can offset that. But as far as I know, I've got an open invitation to go and tour the Cortez operation. But as far as I know right now, yes, they bale their cardboard, and they actually started baling their tires, their used tires. So,
They ship those out, somebody.
yeah, they were with the compacted tires. They were using them to build some fencing and some liners for their cells and stuff. But yeah, I heard they've changed that operation too. Moab, to my knowledge, doesn't do any. When I say compaction, there's a baler and then there's compaction trailers. Cortez has a baler. They may have compaction trailers too, but I know that they have a baler. Moab just has the compacted trailers. I don't know that Moab does any baling of anything. They do have a recycle center, so I'm sure they do something there with their cardboard as well. But yeah, we're at the very, I mean, we're still doing things, you know, like we did 28 years ago. So there are better ways to do things. Unfortunately, all that stuff costs money. So. Anything else there? Okay, so I don't know if there's any more questions on cell access and cell utilization. We can get into that, but we have already made some progress there. Our main access road to our cells is actually going to end up being covered up as we merge cell 5 into cell 4. So we had to construct some new access roads, and we tried to look. The DEQ will tell you in managing a landfill, you can't manage for tomorrow. You need to be managing 20 years in advance. Well, we're not quite there, but we're doing better than managing for tomorrow. So we looked at where are these cells going to be? How are they going to be constructed? Let's put a road in that's going to be there for the next 38 years, not one that was only there for 20 years. So we're doing that. Drop-box location improvements. And again, a little bit of confusion. I hope we can all transition our conversation, our descriptors to the right thing. Per the DEQ, transfer stations are locations where there is activity taking place, such as I mentioned in Moab. They drop the trash on the floor, they separate it out, they move it around with loaders. That's a transfer station. Transfer stations require auditing by the DEQ. They require you to have a permit, and you have to pay a throughput fee to the state. Okay? Drop-box locations are just that. People take their trash up, drop it in a dumpster, and it goes to the landfill. It's not regulated, and we don't have to pay throughput fees. So if we can all try to move our language, and when we talk about these, they're drop-box locations. Okay? So we have drop-box locations in Mexican Hat, and we've got them in LaSalle right now. Blanding City runs their own drop-box location. Monticello runs their own drop-box location. Our only involvement with them, when the dumpsters are full, they call us, we come in and pick them up, we charge them a freight charge. When we roll it across the scales at the landfill, we charge them a tipping fee, and we bill them just like every other customer. Treat our own locations a little different. In the past, nobody would track the costs. It was just something that was there. It was something that we had to do. Well, like I say, as I was looking at the expenses and where can we can't keep losing money. We have to do something. So I looked at our drop-box operations, and between the three of them, we were losing right at $70,000 a year. And I mean losing $70,000 a year.
when you look at what it cost us to staff them, what it costs to run the trucks down, and depreciation on the truck and the fuel and all that stuff, and compare that against to what the site actually generates. It was a huge loss. So we made some improvements and got things a lot better, and we'll continue to look for ways to improve that. And we get into future development, and this is where it really gets expensive. You know, if, on the pricing side of things, you know, we probably want to look at discussions in the future. We did a couple of years ago, we were talking about special service districts and what's the possibility of that and how involved, and the conversations kind of stopped. We might want to revisit that in the future. We want to talk about this enclosed dumping station. It's going to be expensive, but I think we need to go that direction. Power has been an issue. We ran the landfill off of generators. Both of our generators blew up in the last 2 years. They had 33,000 plus hours on them. We got all we could out of them. They just failed after time. We're back in business. We got another new generator, got a screaming deal on one. And we're back in business, but I think we were talking about looking at the grid power, getting grid power out there. Mac's done a lot of work on that, and I don't know where we stand on that, but it's going to be expensive, and it's really the direction we need to go. But if we're going to do grid power, we don't want to be spending a bunch more money on solar power. But if we're not going to do grid, we better get after it with spending money on solar power, because we are at a power level. There's no extra power for us to do anything out there. So, and then we get into equipment replacement, and I've been before the commission several times in the last 5 years, and I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus. The facts are what the facts are. Most of our equipment was there originally when the landfill was built 28 years ago. Within the industry, they'll tell you that a well-run landfill will rotate their equipment every 8 years. That's where the cost breakout is. And I don't have anything to hand you for that, but we're a smaller landfill. We probably don't put the use on that these bigger landfills do, so their 8 years might be our 10 years. But in no case is anybody operating a landfill with 25-year-old equipment, except I should say we do, and we get the job done. But it's time. 10 more years, it's going to be 35-year-old equipment. So we need to look at replacing that equipment now. And the sad thing about this equipment is it's not cheap. It seems like $1 million is the magic number for about every piece of equipment we have. So anyways, that moved us into the capital plan, and I guess rather than go item by item with that, I'll just say that this is a key focal point that I've asked Mac to sit down with me in the next little bit, and we really need to get serious about this capital plan. It's just a matter of economics. If you're looking at $300,000 that we're generating over our expenses over the next 5 years, right, $1.5 million. You look at our capital plan this year, we're asking for about $65,000, and we've got a number of these things done. We'll spend that $65,000. But then next year, we're looking at $1.5 million. Well, there's all of that money over the next 5 years that we've brought in over the operational expense. So, and then you move into the next 3 years after that, and we're at $1.1 million. So I guess you just need to do a little math and figure out that our revenue is going to be about half of what our projected needs are over the next 5 years if we were to replace all this equipment. So probably won't do that, but we need to have a 5-year plan that we stick to, not just a wish list that keeps getting bumped back and bumped back and bumped back. We need to have a real good plan of what's the next piece of equipment we're going to buy or the next improvement we're going to make. And today, that 5-year plan is more of a big wish list than it is a concrete plan. So with that, I guess I'll take any other questions if you have them, but that's just kind of an overview of what we're doing, where we would like to go, and kind of what it's going to cost. Questions?
So that's pretty solid. You're making a profit of 300,000.
Well, so, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we put that plan together pre-COVID. Okay, when we went into last year's budget session, we don't know what's happening with this COVID. The tourism industry is taking a beating. So last year's budget, we went in and said, we're going to start the cell closure activity, so we're going to ask for more money on the operations side than what we would normally have asked for, but we're reducing the amount of our revenue because we just don't know what the COVID thing's going to be. And so instead of that 700,000, that was reduced to 549, I believe, is what we were targeting. And where we're at now, if we extrapolate that out, and it's been a pretty rough 4 months, but tourism's starting to come back for, the southern part of the state and whatnot. We're on track right now for that number to be about 611,000. So as things get better, I think we may find ourselves closer to that 700,000, even though we budgeted the 549. But it was so up in the air, we just didn't know what to do. But as soon as we get over this, that number is the number that based on our tonnage and based on our cost per ton, that's where we should end up being.
You think you'll be 200,000 to 300,000 profit?
I think so. And what I really hope for, as the economy comes back around and oil companies get back in business and they start, increasing their activities, they bring, whenever they do cleanups around the area, they bring their contaminated soils to us and we farm it, and that's nowhere in our revenue, that's nowhere in our budget. That's just, if it comes, great, but we can't plan on it. But I hope that comes back, and like I say, 50% of our volume comes off the reservation right now with Navajo Sanitation and Kanta Township, and I think they've been hit every bit as hard as Moab was hit with tourism. So the amount of solid waste being generated has been down a bit. So I think all that's going to come back. So I'm comfortable with those numbers.
So you think your 2022 capital list is going to take 5 years of profits to pay for? 2022 is going to take until 2027 to pay for the 1.5 million.
Yeah, if we don't find out some other source of funding. Now, Max challenged me a little bit to look for grants and whatnot. I haven't been able to spend a lot of time doing that, but I hear a lot of talk about the CIB, and I don't know how we get on that list, but Mac and I will be having that conversation too. So.
Well, and then you talk about your next 5 years purchase after 2026. I think we're into 2027, but neither here nor there, but that's another $1 million.
Yeah.
So that would be 2032 to get all of your capital needs purchased with the $300,000. And that's a plan you're comfortable in presenting to the commission, and you think you can do that on the rates that you're charging right now for the next 10 years or whatever?
Well, like I say, Mac and I need to sit down. Some of this stuff, this was a wish list. We can't possibly do everything on that list with that money that we're looking at. We need to prioritize things, and one of the things that we can do to save some money, and I'm not sure who's in favor and who's against it, but the idea of San Juan County Landfill going out and buying brand new compactors at $750,000, lovely if we can afford it, but I think we need to be looking for high quality, low hour used equipment. These people that rotate their equipment every 8 years, we need to maybe be buying their stuff instead of brand new stuff, and that can significantly impact the dollars that we're looking for over this 5 years. So, to answer your question, the solid waste business in San Juan County is a little different than what I've seen as I've gone around to other landfills. We've got lots of players in the area that everybody's got their hand in it a little bit.
Well, I'm wondering, I guess, Mac, is there any of this federal infrastructure money that could be made available to the landfill?
From the American Recovery?
Well, that or this infrastructure bill that's
Supposed to be coming out.
1.5 billion.
Yeah.
Is that ship already sailed? Did we put any of the stuff on that?
I think we can make the requests.
This is infrastructure, isn't it? Considered landfill?
I don't know. Typically, the infrastructure that they talk about is water, sewer. Yeah, it absolutely, I would think so. So hopefully, that's something that we definitely need to look into, and that's kind of what Randy mentioned. In light of that is additional grants that are out there. There are actual landfill-type grants from the EPA.
Yep, the legislature is looking for ideas right
Absolutely.
now. How they can spend 1.5 billion.
And we had pitched.
We've given them 1 billion worth of projects for Monticello.
Sure, absolutely, I agree.
5 billion, right, George?
When we were making our request just to the AOG, that was one of them that we had mentioned was the landfill. During COVID with the CARES Act funds, we had explored that electrical grid.
I can't remember what their request was.
So their request was, it was just get us a list of all the projects potentially could be funded using the state. That was, yeah. It was a big ask, and I put that on there as a potential. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but the state legislators right now are convening, I think today, today's Wednesday. Yeah, so they'll be
Considering
yes, all of these.
projects, Randy, hurry and go home and write a letter to David and tell him you need 1.5 for landfill.
Yeah, but they're going to be putting all the money that they have, a couple $1 billion, into buckets, and then they'll have the counties. They'll make a request to have the counties apply for those funds through grants or whatever. And it, kind of from the sound of it, from last week at the Utah Association of Counties, they had mentioned that counties could then use their money to kind of help offset or participate in these funding. And so it's counties don't allocate your money yet. Wait until the state legislatures figure out how much participation that they're going to be required. So we might have to have a match or a 10% buy-in. I don't know what they're going to ask us. We'll definitely be paying attention to the state legislators.
I think the city of Monticello is getting $245,000 of that
Yeah.
kind of money. So I'm not telling you how to do your business, but you might want to hang on to that for a little while because you might be able to use that as a match to get some state money, dollar for dollar.
Or hopefully double down or triple down. So, yeah, there's.
I think this is something we ought to consider for the landfills, using some of these infrastructure funds that are coming in the next year or so, Mac.
Yeah. Well, definitely.
Some of these needs, because that would be money that would come fairly quick in your mind, it comes sooner than 10 years.
Yeah, so, hopefully I'm answering your question. I'm comfortable with the 3 times the 5 years, the 1.5. I think anything over that is just kind of dreaming unless we
If we
can do
could get
this.
COVID money or get infrastructure money, that accelerates this plan by years.
And
Which is
that's-
needed.
It's huge benefit, huge benefit.
Maybe the city would give
So,
you some of that.
until then, like I say, I could stand here for days and talk to you about landfill issues. I'm passionate about it. I'm invested in it. I see the future. Getting to the future is where the challenge is. I think it's really critical that we watch where we spend our money. We don't have a ton of it. I was told in the past, you raise the rates too high and you're making too much money and you're not spending any of it. Well, I'm not spending it because when we do spend it, it's going to be big bucks. So we need to kind of let these accounts build a little bit. So
When we get a department director that's this passionate about his job and what he's doing, I want to help him. And to me, this infrastructure money is about the only way we can really help you accelerate the plan and get done some of the things you want to do in the next 5 years. Maybe we can get those done in the next
That would be incredible if we could do that. And like I say, if that doesn't happen, we still need to continue with conversations. We still have to have a plan. We still need to look at what the potentials are. And the nice thing is, and then I'll step away here if there's no more questions, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're not the first county that's found themselves in this position. There are established models out there where people have taken the situation that we're in and they've turned it around. And not that we want to copy everything that they did, but we can look at what they've done, how they've done it, and we can start conversations about possibly going in that direction. But again, that won't happen today. But you'll see me often over the next year, probably.
The idea of giving the rates, keeping the rates down. What will happen if keeping the rates down creates a collapse operation?
Yeah, which is possible.
That type of position, but they're not looking at it. And they say, keep the rates down for us.
Yeah, so
need to explore and create impression that there is a high need to do that.
there is. Can I share a little information with you, since you bring up rates, and if I'm taking too much time, keep me out of
We've got till 11.
When we went from $30 a ton to $44 a ton, there was a fair amount of pushback on that until people talked to me, and I explained to them why we needed to do this. And after doing that, I didn't have one person complain about the situation. They understood what we were doing. Part of the presentation that I gave to the commission a couple of years ago was looking at surrounding areas. So we're at $44 a ton. Cortez is at $68 a ton. Flagstaff is at $86 a ton. Page, Arizona is $125 a ton. I mean, the national average, and you can go online and look this up yourself, just type in national average on solid waste tipping fees, $55 a ton. So, Grand County, they were not much higher. I think they were at 47. The difference in Grand County, again, that you might find of interest, Grand County is given $400,000 of TRT money to operate their landfill. And everybody says, oh, but they get 3.2 million visitors a year. Of course they should get that. If you go on the state website and see what their total in residential waste that they deal with on the residential side, it's not that much different than ours. We're getting from Kayenta and Tuba City, and trucks leave Window Rock, Arizona, and drive up to us every day. And we've got Eastland and LaSalle and Monticello, Blanding. So we don't get $400,000 of TRT monies. And they say, okay, I'll stop right there. So anyways, when you look at our residents of our communities, and they get upset at $44 a ton, and most of them don't even see that. Most of them see the $18 that the city bills them, or the $10 when they show up to the landfill for a pickup load of trash. That's what they're seeing. And they still feel that it's too much until you talk to them and explain to them. You know, to replace a tire on a loader is $10,000. How do you pay for that? You have to charge for the service. It can't be free. So anyway, sorry, this isn't a lecture. This is education as to, yes, we've got to be careful that we don't keep rates so low, trying to keep people happy, that we put ourselves in a hole we can't get out of.
What's the lifetime of the site?
So, yeah, I think we have 38 more years. Is that what it says? 2050.
Highlighted.
So now we have to be a little careful with that, because this is another cost that we need to incur in the future. Just because somebody developed a landfill in 1993 and did all the engineering and said, you've got 50 years, or whatever the number is, 65 years, you can't just go with that number for the next 65 years. You need to revisit this every once in a while and find out, You know, how have you been building your cells? Have we been bringing in the estimated volume? Have we been bringing in more? Are we using too much dirt, too little dirt? So with the previous engineering work that's been done, this is the lifespan they give us. Is that an accurate lifespan? We actually need to probably re-engineer this landfill again using best practices of today to figure out how we extend the lifespan of it. There's a whole nother side of that too. I mean, everything we do not put in the landfill helps us with our lifespan. So we should be doing things on a recycling or a, you know, I mean, I know it sounds silly, but if somebody brings us a lamp that still works and they just want to throw it away, we really shouldn't be putting that in our landfill. We should, like other facilities around the state, they almost have like a
Thrift shop.
thrift shop. Thrift
Yeah.
shop of
Yeah,
sorts.
they sell it.
People just want to get rid of something. Well, fine, get rid of it. We'll put it over here, and then the public can come in and buy it for $5 or $10. But it doesn't go to the landfill. A lot of landfills, their C&D stuff, they buy chippers, shredders, and they take the lumber that comes in from the construction, they chip it into mulch and sell it, or cut it into firewood and let people buy it. I mean, there's so many things. Landfills aren't dumps anymore. We need to get away from the idea that it's a dump. It's not. It's a resource center that could actually be a good revenue generator. But again, to get there, you got to build that building. You got to, you know, have the staff that can pull the metal out.
And pay the staff.
But the metal coming out will help pay the staff. You know, if you look at national averages, they say 14% of every solid waste truck running up and down the road has recycled. 14% of the load is recyclable metal. That's 1,400 tons to us of recyclable metal. At $200 a ton is $300,000. Is that what that math works out to be?
Just in revenue.
We're putting $300,000 of metal in the ground when we could be doing something else with it. But all that takes money. Anyway, I digress. I'm taking you much deeper than you want to go, probably. Believe it or not, there are businesses in place today that have gone into old, closed landfills, and they call it landfill mining. The things that people have thrown away in the past and the value that those things have today. Can you believe that? Mining landfills. Okay, any questions on anything else? I've kind of gone way deeper than I had planned on, but. Okay. Do I want to stay here, Mac, for the other two conversations? I mean here, but I mean here.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
So the next item on your agenda, I thought I had it, I lost it. Let's see, so the Bluff Transfer Station history and discussion. This one's been on kind of our radar in general, more lately than ever. And it kind of goes back to a resolution that was approved back in February of 2019, and I provided that in your packets. So back in February of 2019, this is resolution number 3 that was passed, where the commission had approved the transfer of property of the drop location in Bluff to, let's see, what was the official name of the Hole in the Rock Foundation. And so we traded properties, kind of got out of that drop box location. The transfer station is what they called it at the time. And in there, just reading through the resolution, and I don't know who drafted it, they talked about the town of Bluff had some people that had objected to that transfer of land and kind of the discontinuation of that transfer station. Also, there was a resolution that came out of Mexican Water against that convey of land as well to the Hole in the Rock Foundation. It kind of goes forward. It mentions in here that this was the Bluff transfer station was the only one in the southern half of the county. Unfortunately, that's not correct. You still had Mexican Hat that is still in operation today. It was in operation back then as well. And so there still continues to be that one in the southern half of the county as a drop location. In here, it had mentioned in the now therefore be it resolved section, so the county administrator shall immediately compile all the documents associated with the conveyance of the Hole in Rock Foundation of the land on which currently Bluff Transfer Station is located to the order of the commission to review and consider the legality of the transfer of the land in the Hole in the Rock Foundation. I don't know if this was ever done. This was, like I mentioned, it was done in February 2019. I don't know if there was a formal presentation. I haven't really had time to go back and look through the minutes, but I had came on board in September of that year, so months and months later than this resolution. So there was, I don't know if that action has taken place, but I figured during this work session I'd bring it and meet all these objectives on here so that we can at least, in my mind, put this resolution to ease and to bed as far as the action that's required of me or the county administrator. So when I look at the transfer of the cell of this, and I've provided in here, the county did go through a formal process to make the transfer, which was a legal process. To me, I would worry if this was done to the close of day. So basically, if this didn't have a public process, if it didn't have commission meeting action where it was open to the public's knowledge on an agenda so that the public could weigh in, then I would be concerned. However, this was not the case. They actually did have a public hearing on this matter back in September 2018. And so they did everything in the light of day. They discussed the transfer, this whole entire transaction. The commission did vote on it, and then the transfer did continue forward. And I have the special warranty deed in here showing that everything was kind of said and done on November of 2018. When you look at one of the questions that it had directed the county attorney to make a thorough legal analysis of the legality of the land exchange and provide this analysis no later than February 2019. Obviously, that date has passed. I did speak with our county attorney on this matter, and everything that we have shows that it was a legal transfer. It had mentioned in here that, let's see, one of the things that was brought up in here, I can't remember, documents should be provided on the basis of the action as well as the appraisal or valuation of the lands exchanged as part of this transaction. If you look at your monitor right now, you see this little square on here, and you can faintly see that was the drop-off location, the transfer area right there. This was just a little over 2 acres of land that we owned. The trade was for this triangle piece down here, so just right down the road, probably 900 feet away from this area. And when you look at that in size, you can obviously tell that there's a difference in size. And so for me, as just in the real estate development side of it, I would not require an appraisal. I wouldn't seek a couple $1,000 appraisal either, because I could already tell just by the property size, the value of the properties is going to be much greater in our favor. It's bigger, it's closer also to the highway, which brings, for me, on the development side of it, a lot more opportunities for a commercial type of business or something that is right, fairly close to the highway. So, if I were to do a comparison analysis and run comps on the value of this property compared to the one we received, ours was a far greater value. And a lot of times, one of the things that can't be weighed by an appraisal is what is the value of the person receiving that property. Here, at the time, my understanding is the Hole in the Rock Foundation, they own all of this outside of it, the upside down Utah shaped property. They owned this already, and they wanted to add this piece to it for their camp, their youth camp that they have in the summertime. So the value obvious to them was great, to where they wanted to have everything together on their property. And so for us, you know, the valuation would be equal, but not necessarily on paper. We got the better end of the bargain. It's kind of what I see it. When, if you're looking at trading horses, you know, they've got a smaller horse, not many hands high. Ours is a lot taller than what we originally had. And so that kind of gets into, you know, why there isn't an appraisal. I wouldn't have spent county money to get an appraisal on that. It's pretty obvious. On here, I mentioned that the county employees are to immediately cease work on the conveyance to the Hole in the Rock Foundation. Remember that the deeds and everything were already transferred in the year, let's say that November before. So when it comes time for this in February, that horse had already been sold. And so there was really nothing to stop. So county employees couldn't stop anything that the horse had already been sold. And you couldn't go back to them and say, hey, the new commission came in, they don't want to sell the horse anymore, we need it back. You can't do that. That horse had already been sold down the road. And so that's kind of where we're at today. And there's a lot kind of outside of this resolution. You know, at the time we were working with Bluff, in the sense that the premises, we were going to treat them no different than any other city or town in the county. The expectation is with Monticello and Blanding that they provide their own property, they operate their own landfill on their own, and you know, the county works with them on the tipping fees that Randy had discussed. So the same premise was in works with the town of Bluff, where the Hole in the Rock Foundation also had mentioned, just kind of just read lightly on here, is they were in agreement that they would let the Bluff town continue to operate for a while. We, at the time, were working, and we do have the mayor here online as well. If you'd like to ask her of any questions. Just in speaking with her, the county at the time was also going down the road of entertaining a lease of this property with them, to where Bluff would then come in and operate it and maintain it like they do with Blanding and Monticello. And you know, we were going through, the county administrator at the time was going through working with her on lease agreements and everything, trying to strike a deal. Bluff was out, purchased signs for their site. You know, here's the Bluff transfer station and hours of operation. They had personnel lined up, volunteers to actually help in that. And then all of a sudden, the county sold that property, and there's no real reason that we can tell from the resolutions or from any minutes of why. But I would imagine that for me, it's, you know, is it really needed with Bluff? You have the Bluff, well, not Bluff, the landfill in operation came after or around that time of the Bluff transfer station. So the question in my head would be, you're just under 11 miles outside of Bluff that has a landfill. Does it really make sense to to continue a drop location here in Bluff. And so I don't know if that was some of it.
I'm just wondering if we're using the right language. Randy, is this a drop box or a transfer station?
It is a drop box, correct, but the resolution touches on as a, yes. And so remember, Randy mentioned this, and it is an important phrase that Randy had mentioned is a transfer station is EPA regulated, and it has requirements for it. The drop box doesn't. People can just come in, drop whatever items, and we charge them a fee. And so there is that difference, but I'm just sticking with the language in the resolution, not to confuse anybody on there, but yes, I appreciate you pointing that out. So, for those of us that don't, it is technically a drop box, yes. Yep. Not regulated. And so, well, and it's gone away. And so, I took it a little bit further on here because there's some questions with this happening that the county back in 1993 entered into an agreement with the Department of Health and Human Services, Indian Health Services, the Navajo Area Indian Health Services, where the county received funds of $30,000 to assist the county in development of the drop box location. Even in here, they call it a transfer station. And mind you, this was all new. And so understand that a transfer station and drop box location wasn't clearly defined by the EPA at that time. So transfer station was a common terminology that they use. And so that's kind of why you see these documents with that. But IHS had agreed to pay $30,000 to the county in establishment of 2 locations, Mexican Hat and Bluff. So they paid that money. We accepted that money on there. But it's interesting going back to the minutes on here and just looking at the overall picture, because I needed to develop in my head this overall picture of how did we get to where we are? Why did IHS pay for the county to establish this quote-unquote transfer station in Bluff? And reading through the minutes, it kind of shows kind of what had happened. And I'll go through this briefly. Got about just a little over half an hour to go in this meeting, so I'll kind of go through this quickly. When you look at in 1991, it seems like from what I can read on the sign, if I'm looking at an animal sign, trying to track what happened, the EPA came out and said to all across America, no more dumps. You can no longer do dumps where you burn the trash. You're causing pollution in the air, hole in the ozone, all of these questions and concerns came about. You need to now establish a landfill that can be operated solely as a landfill and quit the dump burning. And so this created a problem for everybody in the county, all of the cities, but also through the chapters. So there were dumps throughout the Navajo Nation as well. Most of the chapters had a dump from Navajo Mountain on through. It talks about them having a dump. And so with that, you can see in our minutes where the county administrator started working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Indian Health Services to try to figure out what we're going to do in the county. We're closing the dumps. We need to establish a landfill. Where do we establish a landfill? And so they go about the process. And in this, back in 1991, you can see in the minutes where IHS decided that they would cost share with the county or agreed to a cost share in the county where we could demonstrate that 50% of the community was Navajo residents, Navajo Nation residents. And so they had agreed at that time to participate in that half, the share. As you go through, here it mentions that the cities are also going to have to participate in the cost of establishing and operating a landfill. And that was done in 1992. In the minutes, it comes out of that. In 1992, Commissioner Maryboy, and we're talking about Commissioner Mark Maryboy at the time. And so remember Mark Maryboy, not Commissioner Kenneth Maryboy. Commissioner Maryboy at the time said that the Navajo tribe is also working on establishing a transfer site near Aneth. And then in December of 1992, we meet again with the Indian Health Services in that demonstration where they're going to be maintaining landfill and transfer stations kind of throughout with Tuba City, Arizona, Round Rock, New Mexico, and then IHS is working with the Navajo Nation to participate in those landfills as well, but also with San Juan counties for the construction of landfills and transfer stations kind of throughout the county. IHS will be working also with the Utah chapters to operate the transfer stations once they are built. Now that was that one jumped out to me. I'm like, well, IHS should have been operating these. That was kind of one of their commitments that they made up front. They were going to pay, but they were also going to operate it. The Navajo Nation is considering a landfill in the Aneth area if a suitable land can be found. Then as we kind of continue through the timeline, it mentions on here in 1993 that IHS is going to participate with solid waste in areas that deal with the Navajo reservation. Remember, we had received the money and the commitment back in 1993, so we're about that time frame. On here, we received kind of a survey of the rural route in LaSalle, Bluff, and Mexican Hat. This was a survey that they were looking at to establish drop-off locations. At the time, they were calling them transfer stations. And then they were also looking with Mark, and Mark had continued to work on this. He had mentioned on here in the minutes, Utah Navajo Commissioner Maryboy presented handouts to the commission of the proposal to the Navajo tribe made by the Utah Navajo Commission to handle solid waste trucking and transfer stations for the Utah chapters. This proposal will not include the Bluff and Mexican Hat area. These areas will need to be serviced by the county. So now from 1992 to 1993, you see this transition where IHS and Commissioner Maryboy, Mark, was working with the chapters and proposals to establish transfer stations there, and IHS would only participate in the funding, but not the operation and maintenance of Bluff and Mexican Hat. So that's kind of an important note just to keep in mind, that they were still out there working with the Navajo Nation to establish other transfer sites well after that agreement and everything took place. And it was Julie Orr, Bureau of Indian Affairs, told the Utah Navajo Commission that there have been 5 sites selected for transfer stations to serve the Utah portion of the reservation. And so it's in here, it shows that IHS is willing to participate in Bluff and Mexican Hat, in addition looking at 5 additional sites throughout the chapter areas. Each chapter, I didn't touch on that, each chapter was asked to designate 3 locations that they can designate as transfer locations within those areas. Then it was requested that a solid waste subcommittee be appointed. They formed that, of which Commissioner Maryboy was on that as well. And then you start to see the closure. EPA is now calling everybody and saying, hey, you need to close. You need to close these. Get your transfer stations, landfills up and operational. We're going to close. The EPA extends that closure in 1993. Let's see, we get into, I'm still in 1993. The document, this comes with the signing of the document, Mexican Hat and Bluff. They actually formalize that in the document, which you see here before you, which is an amendment to a bigger IHS document but the only portion of this agreement that deals with San Juan County is the portion of the agreement that you have. The other ones are commitments to other areas and to other states, the new Shiprock Hospital, things like that that are mentioned in the beginning paragraph of the document. And so not really relative other than the $30,000 that IHS has committed to Bluff. She had also indicated, this is IHS director that we were working with, she indicated that they were working on the issue of location of the transfer site at the El Jado Monument Valley site at the time as well. When, let's see, later on, Commissioner Mark Maryboy attended the Utah Navajo Commission meeting. This is in September of '93. We had signed this in January of '93, or the President, Peterson Zaw, had signed this in January of '94, so you're still right before the official signing. But Commissioner Mark Maryboy attended the Utah Navajo Commission meeting. One of the topics of discussion was the disposal of solid waste, and the Utah Navajo Commission passed a resolution supporting the proposal to cost share. So they pretty much just supported the agreement in resolution to continue the Bluff and Mexican Hat. Then I get into the contract is signed, and that's what you see before you. Kind of going forward in the meeting minutes. And then you see the transfer. A lot of it was to try to figure out, okay, now where do we establish the Bluff site? There was somebody had stepped forward and offered to donate land where the county also had land here, where it was the old dump site. The county decided, well, we'll just bury the dump and put the drop box location on that site, save money. IHS agreed with that. They were fine with those measures. We also spoke to, so about the same time in '93, you start to see county, we need to establish a landfill, and you start to see CIB discussions taking place of, well, how much are we going to approach the CIB for? CIB comes back and they say, county, you can't have a grant for this. And I would imagine at the same time, all counties across the board were scurrying to establish a landfill process, needing funds as well. CIB come back and said, county, the only thing you can do is a bond or a loan for these funds. And so we started entering in with an application to pay for the landfill. IHS at the time as well committed to pay half of the landfill costs. And so that's where you see this other portion is IHS participated in the main landfill that we have in operation right now in half, CIB the other half of the loan that we had for that site. So you start to see kind of that discussion take place in '93, '94. It was also interesting to note that at the time in Bluff, there was an individual that also kind of stepped forward and said, hey, I'd like to do curbside pickup in Bluff, White Mesa, and White Rocks. And so you kind of start to see an entrepreneur step forward and say, hey, I can do this instead of having a drop location. I can do this on our own, which is interesting that was found in those minutes back in '93, '94. And here, let's see, kind of going forward, you kind of see the formalization of it. Everybody decides to go to the CIB board for the funds. But it was interesting as I move forward, we're running out of time. So it shows in '94 where IHS receives permission from IHS to participate in that $600,000 commitment to the county for their half of the landfill costs. And it was interesting, and it kind of reminds me of today. You have this participation from BIA and IHS really well. We're kind of lockstep with them, participating all along. And then something needs to kick things in gear. In one of the minutes, Commissioner Maryboy goes to the president, says, "President, we need help." All of a sudden, the president kicks things in gear, and we have the contract for the $600,000 coming right after that. So the president was able to reach down and speed things up for landfill with IHS and those funds. In 1994, in November 1994, you kind of see where we start to enter into the bond. On there, IHS continues to participate with us for the $650,000. That final commitment and signatures take place in January 1995. In 1995, we still had the Bluff dump. So remember, we started back in 93, 94 with this discussion. 95, we still didn't have the drop box location. We started to get into minutes of the cost of establishing the drop box location. The cost actually exceeded the 1993 estimate, where IHS was going to pay $15,000 for each, which was half of the county's $15,000. It actually exceeded the cost. And when you look at cost to construct, cost of the dump, the containers, staff, things like that, to get that up and going. There was one final note that I want to get to in the minutes that I thought was pretty important, and it was, let's see, we go to bid on all of them because we had Bluff, Mexican Hat, and LaSalle transfer station that we did at the same time, so it was kind of a 3 for 1 with our construction. We also, at the time, were working all along with Monticello and Blanding on their closures and trying to figure out what to do with them as well. Blanding and Monticello both had dumps. There were the open pit, and obviously the EPA is coming out and hollering at all of us to get out of the dumps. The county kind of met with them and agreed that the county would work with the cities if they would put up the land and operate transfers or the drop box locations. Then the county would come in with our equipment and assist them in covering up their dumps, bringing in soil to close the dumps so that they can also become in compliance as well, but that the county would assist them with those drop-off locations, getting them formalized and up and going as well as Bluff, LaSalle, and Mexican Hat. In 1996, you see in the minutes that the transfer station, Commissioner Maryboy stated that the Navajo Commission has directed Clarence Rockwell to write a proposal draft for the chapters to build transfer stations, and I'm assuming that that's at the chapters as well. But then in the minutes following that, I don't see anything in the minutes that I've received. Drop locations for Mexican Hat and Bluff. They wanted in that document all of the Navajo residents to be within a 30-mile radius of a landfill or sanitation. And so in your packet, I've also provided you with maps. I mapped it out. Just, okay, where are we at? How far does it take each of the chapters? Now, I didn't go all 7 chapters. I didn't go to Tisnos, I didn't go to Denohozo, which is way down on the border. I didn't include, they would be closer to Canta. If I were a resident down there, I would go to Canta, which which is closer than coming all the way up into here. But when I look at Red Mesa to Mexican Hat, they're 42 miles, and so that's well outside of that 30-mile goal that IHS originally had. But if you look at Red Mesa to our landfill site, that's 26 miles to get to it, so within the 30. When you look at Aneth, they're 31 miles from our landfill. When you look at Mexican Water, and I have two on Mexican Water, they're 34 miles to the landfill. Bluff to the landfill is only 10.4 miles, so just kind of keep that in mind. You've got on here Oljedo to Mexican Hat is 33 miles. And then you've got, let's see, this one is the Mexican Water, the other Mexican Water, 39 miles to Mexican Hat. And then Montezuma Creek, you got 23 miles to the landfill. So just those, they're fairly close to that 30-mile goal that IHS has put out there in the original document, kind of their hopes and anticipation. But what is missing is, I don't know what happened at the chapter level. You've seen IHS, they were still trying to get the chapters. You've seen Commissioner Mark Maryboy at the time trying to get the chapter involved with drop locations, transfer stations within the reservation side of it, and I don't know what happened and why that went away. But to me, just looking through everything, it just kind of shows that there was this trail back in '93, that an anticipation that there would be more throughout the county. And so when you look at the resolution, trying to figure out, okay, what behind the resolution, what was the premise behind it? Was it to reestablish Bluff as a transfer station where you're 10 miles outside of the landfill? Is that really your intention? When we looked at the cost, and Randy had mentioned this, you were at a $70,000 loss. You can't operate a landfill and drop-off locations at a loss. We continue to operate at a loss in Mexican Hat, but it's, to me, that's that southernmost drop location. It still makes sense to continue forward with that one. But we were operating in the red at 10 miles outside of our main landfill, even though the fact that the landfill came looks like about the same time as these transfer or the drop-box locations were there. We had also worked with Montezuma Creek. Commissioner Maryboy had worked with Montezuma Creek. They had a location there where they actually installed or had drop boxes there in an enclosed area, and I don't know what happened with that, if that was closed down, or talking to Randy on some of the history with this. Navajo Sanitation is out there, and they also perform pickup and delivery to our landfill. I don't know if some of that went away with Navajo Sanitation, and that was kind of, Navajo Sanitation would then pick up at the chapters, and they would provide that sanitation need for the reservation, or what the case was. But in talking with Mayor Lebanon on here, what would it look like if we were to reestablish a transfer location back in, or a drop box location back in Bluff? One of the things that I noted in those minutes is you had this business entrepreneur who wanted at that time to do curbside. Well, they have curbside now, and that's working very well for the area. And so to put a drop box location now would actually, for me, on the economic standpoint, would be a little bit more detrimental to his business dealings, where he's providing that service now without the county being there, obviously he would have to be making a profit doing so. But for us, even with the location and the property that we had traded for, At the time, Hole in the Rock Foundation personnel were out there with us, and we started clearing the site. And if you look at that map of the site, you can kind of see where we had started clearing it, and then they recognized that, hey, there's some antiquities and archaeology that needs to take place, and a NEPA study should really be performed on this area before we start digging, and so everything stopped at that location, and that's when you kind of see that phase out here, more recently. And so that, Commissioner, kind of is my overview regarding that resolution. I just kind of open it up to you for questions or comments. I think if you gave me a magic wand, what could we do to fix this? I hear, not last year, but before COVID, as we would go out and we would meet at the chapters. I remember the last one where we met at Mexican Water, and we had all the chapters come in and give a report. President Nez and his staff was there. One of the things that they continued to mention was the need for landfill, the need for drop box on the reservation side of it. And so for me, I think it would be prudent upon us to try to figure out what happened at the chapter side of it on the Navajo Nation side, to see what happened with the establishment of those drop locations. How do we get one down, and I'm just throwing this out there, to Red Mesa, which is kind of central. How do we get one down there? Is there property? They had originally, each chapter came up with 3 preferred locations within their chapter boundaries. Where were those? And, is it worth it to strike up conversations with the Navajo Nation to find out or IHS, to find out where they're at in that process, to see if we can establish something, even 30 miles, that's a long way to go. That's 60 miles round trip. If you drive like me, that's an hour. Plus, you're spending time at the drop box, just kind of browsing. And so you're an hour and a half out. So it'd be nice to get something a little bit more centralized, but I feel that Bluff is too close to the landfill. It would hurt the business operation there. But if we can get it somewhere down further south, that would make more sense to me. It still doesn't solve the Navajo Mountain issue. so you're kind of on the periphery there.
We're using the transfer station.
Do you? Okay. At Tuba? Okay.
And they use the landfill near Flagstaff.
Okay. So do you have somebody, does Navajo Sanitation?
We have some deep canyons.
Well, that's the problem. Nobody wants deep canyons anymore. Yeah, and people do that. I laugh, and it's sad because I don't think anybody should be littering, especially up on Navajo Mountain. Yeah.
Is Can that come and pick up the trash at Navajo Mountain?
The Page does.
Page.
That's, what is it? The highest, the expensive.
Is that? Yeah. 100.
Services operates a business out of Page. They shuttle everything to Washington County landfill.
Oh, really? Page to Washington County. No wonder they're $100 tipping fee. Wow. And they used to have smokestacks to burn all that stuff right there. What happened to those? No more. Well, any questions for me? I just want to put that resolution to rest. I acted on it. I don't know if anybody acted on it before, but now you have a complete summary. And I don't know if you have any comments or if I misstated, misquoted.
Thanks, Mac. I do have a couple of comments. Just to put this transfer of the land into perspective, Bluff incorporated in August of 2018. And right after that, this process began to do that transfer. At the same time that this was going on with San Juan County, I was working with the then administrator to be able to take over that Dropbox location. And as Mac indicated, we had staffing lined up, we had signs, we had a work schedule. I believe there was at least one meeting with Mr. Rarick. We were set and ready to go. And it was with the same premise that's been laid out for Blanding and Monticello, that Bluff would be treated the same as the other two municipalities. There was a fee schedule being discussed. This was all the week of and the week prior to the transfer occurring. So you might imagine that the town of Bluff was not happy to have relied on the administrator's word that this was a work in progress. We were close to presenting it to the commission and getting approval of a lease. When this occurred, the concern by the people in town was not just for the town of Bluff, because San Juan County boundaries don't stop at Bluff. They extend into the Navajo Nation. And a lot of people use that transfer station, not just Bluff. And I would agree with Mac, the mileage when you're going 30 miles one way with trash, it's not pretty. A lot of times it gets scattered, and then you get there and you've got to go somewhere else now. You've got to drive up to, through Bluff up to the transfer station. So I'm not really sure where the commission is going to go with this. I would ask that it look more closely at Bluff or at some place closer to Red Mesa, but that something needs to be restored. The other comment that I have, and I know you're short on time right now, the other comment I have goes to the map that Mac showed of the land exchange. There was no appraisal done, and I would beg to differ with Mac a little bit on this. You have a triangular piece that San Juan County ended up with that I'm not sure what use you'd put that to. It's not a very even piece. Yeah, showing it on the screen. It's triangular. I'm not sure what you would do with that. Whereas Hole in the Rock Foundation, while they got a slightly smaller piece, they have a usable piece of property because it's adjacent to their campground, and it enhances their campground. I'm not sure why anybody wants to put a campground on top of an old dump and a current transfer or Dropbox location, but that's what they did. I think an appraisal would have been appropriate. I don't see the use that Mac is talking about for that. And I'm not really sure that any commercial business wants to be located in that particular area. But be that as it is, I think an appraisal would have been appropriate. And I guess to wrap it up, the main thing that I'd like to leave the commission with, and thank you for letting me speak, is that Bluff isn't concerned just about Bluff. It's concerned about our neighboring communities being able to dispose of their trash in an efficient manner. And I think I'll just close with this. That triangle most likely is an archaeological site as well as the square up where we traded. So that whole area is archaeologically rich. And I don't see that this triangular piece, like you said, Mac, having to get NEPA involved is going to be necessarily an economic boom to anybody. So with that being said, thank you for listening to me. I think the town of Bluff was really disappointed that our agreement didn't go forward because we fully intended to run the Dropbox location.
Thank you, Ann. All right, any questions? There really was no next steps. I was just complying with the resolution on there, just making sure that everybody sitting at the table knew and understood kind of the history of how we got there. You know,
Mac, are you still muted on your end?
yes. I was hoping that I am. Yeah, how's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better, thank you.
We just sold the horse, and you missed it. And so,
Anyway, what I'm thinking is, at one time, I guess Indian Health Service committed partnership. I wanted to have Mr. Mary Boy, ears, hopefully, see if he could entertain a site within this chapter, and we can pursue another funding from IHS and community.
down south.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be.
And also mention that there is critical need
We've heard
for
it.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know
Yeah. Yep.
there's a need for drop off,
Yeah.
as Randy indicated that there's three types. One is major landfill, which he's operating. The other one is transfer station, where some processing has to be done,
Yeah.
and then the drop off.
The Dropbox. Yeah.
So Dropbox,
Yeah.
maybe that could be entertained.
Yeah. And especially the Dropbox without having. I worry, and it may be why the Navajo Nation is seeing such difficulty is once you get BIA and EPA, I can just imagine the regulations and the red tape that's on there. A Dropbox location, I think, can be super easy,
Yeah.
not necessarily easy, but I think it's one of those things that we could definitely push forward to. Did you have something?
Yeah,
Red?
if I can, just quickly, I know we're running out of time, but if we're, as a commission, if you're gonna be having these thoughts about future Dropbox locations, and I can come back and get into this in more detail, but just a couple things to remember. We have an established Dropbox at Mexican Hat right now.
Right.
Correct.
Okay? We have the community of Halchita just across the river with, I've been told, 75 homes. Okay? We get 6 customers a day at the Dropbox in Mexican Hat. Okay? We lose money like crazy in Mexican Hat. We got about $150 a day in expenses, and we make, I think our average is $7 a customer. Okay? So we have an established Dropbox that's there, that's open for the public, for people to use, and people don't use it. I don't know why. I think I know why. But before we go, and these costs to build a Dropbox location in 1993 were $30,000 that was split. The cost today to build that same facility is going to be closer to $150,000. Okay, so just a little. I hope I'm giving you information that helps you think about things. And you ask where we go in the future. I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But I'd hate to see us spend $150,000 building a location that only 6 people show up to.
Yeah. I
So-
think the lot of Monument Valley, the area is dumping theirs in Kieta.
Yeah,
So
I think so too.
they have no reason to come this way unless they go to Kieta. There's a Indian Health Service. There's bashes there, so they get a lot more done taking their trash over there than coming towards
Yeah.
Mexican Hat.
And I think that kind of leads us right into that next item that we're touching on is, as I drive down through there, you happen to see the burn barrels out there. So a lot of people burn their garbage, so they don't have to take garbage in. But then, like you, Commissioner, you had mentioned, people are taking it and throwing it off into the ravines and that.
Yeah.
And here in the county, I mean, we've got to where we can fine, and that's, one of the things that we'll be putting back in the newspaper is, hey, if you're doing this illegal disposal and illegal dumping throughout the county, you can be fined. But then when it comes to the reservation, I don't know, can we even enforce this when it comes down to the reservation side of it? And so enforceability is gonna be a key part, and that's what I think you're seeing on the Alchita difference is they can throw it out in the ravine, they can burn it in a barrel, and it's easier, cheaper, But if we can't
There's
find it, how do you
the,
police it?
EPA officers, but, on the Navajo Nation, but they're not writing tickets.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes it harder.
It just complicates the matter.
Yeah.
If they were just like, grazing officers on the Navajo Nation, they're not writing tickets. There's no complaints being filed on, and that's where the issue of, what did they call it, the maintenance of policies.
Yeah, the compliance side of it.
Compliance is not there.
Yeah, that makes it super hard. All right, we can continue to study it, to look down there and see
Okay.
what our options are and report
Yeah.
back. Further date. And I'd like to talk to Mark and just see what happened. And I don't know, Commissioner Maryboy, if you know, where did it end up? Why, or does it continue? I know that when we heard from President Nez's staff, they had mentioned that, hey, they're trying to get more locations throughout. And so I think it'd be interesting to figure out where they're at as well. And so, other than that, that's our report. It's 11:01.
Hey,
So,
11:01?
yep, if we're okay, we can. So we do have on our schedule that we would enter into the executive session. We would need a motion to do that, knowing that we'll push into our next meeting as well on time.
So, right now, we're opening up for the regular board meeting?
No, we've got just that last that executive session that you guys had asked.
Motion to go into executive session.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. The motion for executive session by Mr. Maryboy, second by Mr. Adams. If there's no discussion,